Hello, so we're here to talk about Door County Reads, which started out as the Big Read Door County 15 years ago. My name is Beth Lokken. I'm the Youth Services Librarian at Sturgeon Bay.
And I'm Laura Kayacan, the Adult Services Librarian in Sturgeon Bay. And I was not here for the first year, so Beth,
goodness.
What book did we do?
Well, we did The Grapes of Wrath, which was part of the list of the NEA's list. You've got to pick when you do the big read list from the list. And Grapes of Wrath was the very first one. I wasn't super involved. I was on the committee that was putting everything together. But this was back when Becca Berger was the director. And
it was originally Peninsula Players, wasn't it?
Yeah,
that
it was
started,
originally
applied for the grant.
And Alan was the one who really was the mover for this. He was the guy who set the whole thing up and wrote the grant and all of that. And we were the partner because if he was writing for the grant, he needed a library as the partner. So we were not the main movers that first couple of years. He was the one who was writing the grant. And of course, Becca was helping. And of course, we were hosting all of the big kinds of things that were going on. But yeah, I wasn't super involved in this one.
Okay, then the next year, year number 2, and I think Alan chose most of these original books. Yeah. Again, we had an NEA grant this year, and we did Tom Sawyer, and this is the first year I got involved. I remember creating a character of Tom Sawyer's aunt. What was her name? Aunt Polly, I think. And put her in the middle of the library.
Oh, and scared the Jesus out of people. In my rocking chair from the children's department, we had this mannequin dressed in costume from the time, and people just weren't expecting to see a little old lady sitting in a rocking chair. So
yeah, and I remember creating a newspaper from that time out of the Door County newspaper so we could see what was going on at the time that the book was set.
Yes.
So it was a lot of fun. It's a real classic.
Well, yes, we've tried a bunch of different kinds of things and different interests over the course of the years. So different displays and different ways of approaching things a little bit as we go along.
And then the third year, the book was Willa Cather, My Antonia. And again, this was an NEA grant. And so we had a very limited list of books to choose from. At that time, they expanded the list later on, but at that time, this was the on the list. And it was a lot of fun because it had to do with Midwestern immigration, which is one of my main interests, genealogy and immigration, and the way that the pioneers settled on the plains. Yeah. And again, I think I made a newspaper that showed what was going on at the time of the book. And I remember Coggin from Crossroads did a program. She's actually from Nebraska, isn't it? Where the book was set. So it was a lot of fun doing this book.
And Coggin over at Crossroads, so Crossroads at Big Creek here in Door County, close on to Sturgeon Bay, right across the highway from the main part of Sturgeon Bay, has been a partner with us since the beginning. So we have always worked with them as well as the theater groups, as well as the schools, and we'll get into the school stuff when we hit the next book.
And I think in the very beginning, we always had a sort of festival as the closing over at Crossroads. And I think there was a lot of pioneer craft demonstrations and things.
And so because they've got because the Crossroads has the village there with all of the historic buildings.
Village.
Yeah, so that was a time when we could have people come in for all of those. So in the beginning, we were trying to have, instead of having something during the middle of things, the final program would be a family-friendly festival that you could bring your kids and whole families could come to and see something that was maybe a little bit different than what had gone on during the course of the main part of the program.
And then the next year we did Fahrenheit 451.
And you will notice that there
was
is a graphic novel of
One-
Fahrenheit 451, and this is what we handed out to the
The kid-
schools.
the kids,
Yeah.
yeah. And then the adults got to read. This is, of course, a classic book that talks about censorship and book burning. So it was really fun to do this again. I don't know if fun's always the word. These books are serious, but we enjoyed putting programs together
Yeah.
on these books.
So yeah, this was one of the years when we actually gave out, and I believe we got a Raybrook Foundation grant
To give out
these graphic novels
Yeah.
to the schools. So that was a fun thing. And the school should still have all of their copies of all of those if they want to use them.
Yeah. And then we did Carson McCullers. These were all still NEA grants.
Yeah, these were all
Okay.
still NEA list.
And didn't we have Fred Heidi be the keynote speaker that year?
I don't remember who was the keynote speaker that year.
But
So,
again, another classic on the list of NEA books that we
Mhm.
had to choose from before they expanded the list. And I can't say that I remember too many of the programs that went on from this year, but they were always very interesting. The
Mhm.
keynote, the
Mhm.
kickoff was always some local people who had some sort of real insight into the topic.
and we usually tried to do some music. So we bring a musical
Yeah.
piece into the kickoff.
And then the next year,
We did
did not get the grant.
because they
So-
had shrunk the number of grants nationally so small that we just decided to go it on our own.
And
this
so we
year
had
was-
free choice. It wasn't on a list of books. And I remember Beth
we-
recommended
We
this
had a
book.
terrible time trying to pick out which book we were going to do. We were back and forth. And finally I said, if we were going to do a mystery, I've read this one, and I'm not a huge reader of grown-up mysteries, but Laurie R. King and this series, and I said, I just chewed through this series. I loved it to pieces. And The Beekeeper's Apprentice then came up. And so this is a Sherlock Holmes book.
So it opened up the whole Sherlock Holmes
Mhm.
range of books for us to talk about. And we had an expert come in on who was an expert on Sherlock Holmes.
Mhm.
And the big thing that year was it was the first time we actually interviewed an author from one of the books we were doing. Of course, the earlier ones.
We had the author speaker. She virtualed in from her home on the West Coast.
On
And this
Skype,
this
which
is
was
back
big back
before
then.
it was a thing. And
Yeah.
we did it at Crossroads at Big Creek. in
That
their
was
big auditorium.
2013. We had her on Skype at
Yes.
Crossroads.
So-
So that was really exciting for us at the time.
Mhm. This
Okay.
book also, because we were doing mysteries, we did a kids mystery, and we gave out to the elementary school students, we gave out copies of Geronimo Stilton for them to be able to read. And I think that was second and third grade. So
And I remember also we had someone painted a stand that people could
we
pose
still
with.
have that. We
Yeah.
still have that. So it was a bee theme, and you could put your face
Face in
through
the
it and
bee.
take your picture. Yeah.
And I think we had programs on beekeeping and all that sort of thing. So
Mhm.
another really fun year.
Yeah, so that had a lot, and that took us away from those classics and
Mhm.
gave us a contemporary book, which we have in the future. We have kind of gone with a contemporary look for a lot of them.
So the next year, Becca Berger chose Wendell Berry
Memory of Old Jack.
and Memory of Old Jack, which has really stuck with me. I wasn't too familiar. I had heard of Wendell Berry in the past, but I wasn't really too familiar with him. But now it really, I see him everywhere these days because he's really giving out a message of conservation and the earth and
Resilience.
farming,
Yes.
which will maybe be something we'll be doing in the future. So this was a very, very interesting book to do, and it's one of a series of books set in a fictional place. So we ended up getting all of the books in the series. If anyone's interested in reading them, they're all really wonderful. And one of Wendell Berry's poems really sticks with me about the wild things and finding peace.
So that was lots of fun.
And then the next year was a big year for us, Ordinary Grace. The first year we had the author actually come here and give a talk, and we held that at Crossroads.
And oh my gosh, we filled and overfilled that building.
Yeah, it was amazing how many people kept coming to hear William Kent Kruger speak. Of course, he's from Minnesota. He's a neighbor to us here in Wisconsin, and there's a big group of mystery writers over in Minnesota.
He had been here with his mystery writer group before, so
in the past,
but so many people came out, and this was one of the first years where we didn't get our books back. So because these books are a gift, people can return them, and often people 6 months after the program is over, a stack will come back of a dozen or 2 dozen that'll come back to the friends to sell in the book sale, because people decide that they don't want it. Nobody brought these back. It was
very, very popular. And William Kent Kruger has written some series of books, but this was a standalone of his at the time, and it spoke to the Middle West values of the years?
The late 1950s.
50s.
Late 1950s.
So I remember wasn't at Crossroads there was sort of a retro 1950s?
We did, yes, as our closer, we did a 1950s era thing. We had a black rotary phone for the kids to try out. We had all sorts of things from the 50s that people could try and look at. Even though I was never a baton twirler in high school, I showed them how.
All sorts of fun things from the 1950s.
Yes.
And then in 2016,
American Dervish.
We did American Dervish, and this one's pretty interesting because the author Ayad Akhtar he grew up in Milwaukee. He was born and raised in Wisconsin, and his parents were from Pakistan, both of them doctors. So he wrote a book based on his experience in Milwaukee area. And we were able to explore the theme of Muslims in Wisconsin or in the United States and Islam. And we had some speakers come from Green Bay, from the mosque in Green Bay, and all sorts of different subjects. But the fun thing for me is that Ayad Akhtar himself is a great Green Bay Packer fan, and he mentions it in many of his interviews. Also, he's written a recent book, Homeland Elegies, based on a sort of memoir, but it's actually fiction, and he talks a lot about Wisconsin in that book. Also, it won the Wisconsin Library Association's Best Book of 2020, I believe, recently. So another interesting author. We didn't have him come and speak, but didn't the Pulse write or the Advocate write
I had an
interview
article
with him?
Yeah.
So then the next year was, again, Becca Berger chose Richard Rousseau's Empire Falls, which I wasn't too familiar with. Richard Rousseau, he's a very popular author, but I was really interested in reading this book. Again, it's set in Middle America and has to do with a decaying town. And we had a lot of good programs around this one also.
Yes.
But unfortunately not the author. Again, it was a free choice, not on any list of any of the official books for the NEA, since we didn't have a grant again. But we had a lot of really good programs surrounding this book. Then in 2018.
This was so much fun.
There's another really excellent book, and this one is nonfiction. It's written by a Hmong a woman who settled in the area after the Hmong were brought into the United States after the war, Vietnam War.
So The Late Homecomer, a Hmong Family Memoir by Kao Kalia Yang. She was fantastic. She came here and she spoke. That year, we had her speak at the Stone Harbor, and we filled the room that year. And then I had a blast with her because I took her to a couple of the high schools, and we went up to Gibraltar, and we're at the auditorium up there, and we went to Sevastopol, and so she and I drove all over the town that day, and all over the county, and had a wonderful time. She's great.
And she was from Minnesota, but a lot of the Hmong settled here in Wisconsin. So there were
Green Bay, there's
Green Bay,
Appleton,
all over the state.
Wausau, Madison, yeah.
So we learned a lot about the culture at that time. The next year we did 2 books. This time we did The Death and Life of the Great Lakes by Dan Egan, who's from the area. And we did a partner book, Wintering by Peter Guy from Minnesota. This is a book of fiction. Of course, The Death and Life of the Great Lakes is nonfiction, and just is a remarkable book talking about the ecology of the Great Lakes, and including Lake Michigan.
We had both authors come that year.
Yeah, that was really spectacular. Dan Egan came and told us about the Great Lakes, and he was interviewed at the high school. I think we held it, right?
Oh, yeah. And another one of those where it packed the room, and that's, I think, 350 people can fit into that auditorium.
Yeah.
So,
and then of course, Peter Guy came. He's from Minnesota. This is a kind of a mystery.
And it's late in the series. So there's, I think, 3 books before this in the series. This was his most recent of that.
And he was very well received. I think people
yes.
were really interested in hearing him talk.
You know, people had a wonderful time that year.
Yeah, I really enjoyed both of those books. And then the 2020, we did Virtual Wander by Leif Enger. And again, he came to speak here and was very well received. And this one is a little more gentle in a way, has a little magical realism in it.
It was a lot of fun, and we did a lot of things about lakes. Wasn't that the year that we talked about surfing in the Great Lakes?
I think it was. I think fun. The book is the book set up in
it's
northern?
Set up, yeah, it's set on Superior.
Yeah. So I really enjoyed that one too. I always love when the authors come and speak too. That makes it really special. And then we hit the pandemic, COVID. And
we chose this 2.5 years book before we had the program.
Yeah, 2.5 way years before there was any COVID on the horizon. And it really was amazing how that worked out. And
Station 11.
It just so happens,
John Mandel.
Yeah, and it so happens that there's a new series coming out on HBO any day now, based on this book.
Yeah.
And the screenplay was written by Patrick Somerville, who's from Green Bay. So we were able to, since we had to do online programming last year because of COVID, we were able to have Emily and Patrick in a conversation, which was very special.
Yes. So that was the year then that we went entirely virtual for all of our programming. And it was kind of nice to be able to say, don't worry about the weather, come to the programs. Yeah. So then this year coming. And
this year, the book will be announced in a couple days.
Although by the time you see this, the book will have been announced. The books.
And we're really excited about some of the programming
and this year we're going to be doing a lot of things virtually still.
A combination of virtual and in person, because virtual seems to have taken over for people who are not in the area. They really enjoy being able to join in.
Also, if you have any, it's disability friendly.
Yes.
You don't have to try to get to a place. So
especially when our programs are held in January, February, in the middle of
the
possible
winter.
Snowstorms. I can remember driving north to the auditorium theater in the middle of snowstorms. So this will make it easy for people to join from the area and from outside the area.
And I think that it's been a good run this last 15 years. We've had a really wonderful time helping to bring these books to the community, and we look forward to doing it in the future.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. Bye, everyone.